technology. Okay, right. Welcome. Sorry for the delay. Welcome to the Planning Committee for Thursday, 24th of June. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight, and we have Planning Committee members. My name is Councillor Ray Wall and I will be chairing, and I'd like each one of you to introduce yourselves for those that are members of the public who are watching on the screen, starting with Councillor Swan Padder, please. Just introduce, just say your name, who you represent.
Yeah, it's Councillor Swan Padder representing Lady Margaret Ward.
I'm Councillor John Ball from Ealing Common Ward.
Councillor Fabio Conti, Hanger Hill Ward.
Councillor Miriam Rice from Northolt Mandeville Ward.
Councillor Julian Gallant from Ealing Broadway.
Councillor Kamaldeep Sahota from Lady Margaret Ward.
Councillor Tariq Mahmood from Perryville Ward.
Councillor Louise Brett from Holbein Ward.
Right, thank you. We do have some members of the committee who haven't arrived yet. I believe there's some traffic problems out there. So they may well have arrived during the meeting. However, so I don't have any apologies. I have apologies for lateness from Councillor Summers for childcare duties, but he should be along at some point in the near future. I think Councillor Anand, Praveen Anand, has sent apologies. Therefore, those are the only ones I know of at the moment. Urgent matters, I don't believe I haven't been told of any urgent matters, unless someone brings them to my attention now. No. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? I don't see any, thank you. And I don't know of any matters to be considered in private. So I'll move on to the minutes from last meeting. For those of you who are here, you've read them, do you believe they're a correct record of that meeting? If not, please let me know. I'll take that as approval. Thank you. So, of course, we didn't have any site visits because of the COVID restrictions. We will hopefully be up and running with site visits when we can. I did think it was going to be after the 21st of June, but now I think it's the 19th of July, commonly known as the Second Freedom Day. So I do plan to have site visits. I don't think we'll be in time for the next meeting, but from then on we will try and to carry them out again. So we move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the workshop and land between Hanson Gardens and Lewis Road, Southall. So the officer will present the scheme and then we'll have speakers on that. So go ahead.
Thank you. Could I have the first slide on the screen, the site plan, please? It was the site plan, I think, you wanted. Okay. This application is to redevelop a narrow backland site which is overgrown and contains derelict former education buildings. It lies behind the rear gardens of houses on Hanson Gardens, Beaconsfield Road and Lewis Road, with narrow gated entrances from Hanson Gardens. And the site plan should show that. This application was deferred at the May Committee in order to confirm the exact width of the site access, and this has now been measured on site, to provide information on alternative uses considered for the site, and the applicant has provided this, and to provide the inspector's decision on the recent hotel appeal, which is appended to the committee report. It was also to arrange a site visit or photographs and a video walkthrough of the site, and we have that now on the screen.
Perhaps it might be helpful to just say what page it is in the report as well, because it isn't page 18 of, sorry, page 2 of 38. This slide is in the report.
Right. Okay. Well, there should be a video walkthrough of the site. Anyway, I'll move on. This is a minor residential development of 9 dwellings, 3 single-story houses, 4 two-story houses, and 2 flats in a 2-story building. And we should have an image of that development. All the proposed dwellings would exceed minimum London plan floor space sizes, would be dual aspect and receive adequate light.
Sorry, hold on a minute. Hold on. We seem to have some background noise. Is this coming from?
So I think committee, you're playing the video as well as the presentation, so you might want to stop the video.
Yeah, I think that was the sound of the walkthrough, wasn't it? So that's, we do want to see that, don't we?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
So I was just saying, Chair, we wanted to see the walkthrough, so you know that we were hearing the sound but not seeing it, so we want to see it, don't we, Chair?
It's one of the reasons we deferred it from last time, was to have a walkthrough of the site and the video, etc. And while we're trying to do that, and the other reasons we deferred it was for the access. Is it me? Is there feedback from my mic? Is that better? Right. Okay. So the other reason the other reasons we deferred it was the width of the access to the property and for information for alternative uses of the site. So I'm just filling in time really while we try and get this up and running. Right, is this the video? So the point of this for people who weren't at the last committee is that we felt that we needed to see the site. Obviously, we couldn't go and see the site because of COVID restrictions, so we asked for a walkthrough. And it's obviously buffering quite a bit. just let it go. It'll take a bit longer, but it will buffer. It will. And we're nearly halfway through. Right? It looks like we were. It's not having the desired effect, really, is it? Maybe while we're doing this, the officer can talk through the scheme as well, so we can watch and listen, because we don't need to listen to footsteps.
Okay. All the proposed dwellings would exceed minimum London plan floor space sizes, would be dual aspect and receive adequate light and outlook. All would have private amenity space, which on balance is considered to be adequate in size and quality. The proposal is also not considered to result in a loss of social infrastructure premises because evidence is provided that the site has been vacant for 25 years, is overgrown, and the building's derelict and unsafe. This indicates the former education use has been abandoned. In addition, the applicant has now provided an assessment of current supply and need for community uses in the Southall area, which confirms that it is not required for other forms of local social infrastructure. The proposed buildings would be 1 and 2 stories and lower than surrounding residential properties. I think there should be a slide of, okay. Existing derelict buildings cover 66% of the site, and the proposal would reduce this coverage by almost half to 37%. Density is not high, and the proposal is not obviously overdevelopment. The proposed units would have flat roofs and a contemporary design, with the massing across the site reduced by gaps between buildings. Could we have a slide of the elevations? While the elevations are considered rather bland, this development would be barely visible from any public areas, would have no significant impact on the street scene, and is generally considered acceptable. The scale and height of these buildings would be broadly similar to the hotel buildings in the recent hotel appeal. The appeal inspector then concluded that these buildings would have an attractive contemporary design, would be largely hidden from public views, and screened by buffer landscaping and outbuildings in adjoining rear gardens. He considered these buildings would not adversely affect the character and appearance of the area. And in our view, similar considerations apply to the current scheme. Could we have the aerial slide as well now? There are objections by 30 individual residents and a petition signed by 28 residents and 2 councillors. An objection from Hillingdon Civic Society as well. Issues raised include closeness to adjoining properties, loss of privacy, overdevelopment of a backland site, increased traffic, access for emergency services, and increased parking pressure on Hanson Gardens. However, the development is not considered to have unacceptable impacts on the immunity of adjoining occupiers in terms of overlooking, overbearing effects, or impacts on daylight, due to the separation distances from nearby dwellings, the low scale of the proposed dwellings, the position and orientation of windows, and the screening effect of boundary trees and outbuildings. A daylight sunlight assessment also concluded that very limited effect on daylight would occur to neighbouring dwellings, and that negligible reductions in sunlight or overshadowing would occur to adjoining rear gardens. Access to the site would be via an existing access road with a turning head to allow for refuse and emergency vehicles. Despite objections on inadequate access for emergency vehicles, the width of the access has been measured on site at 3.1 to 3.26 meters, which is adequate for such vehicles. In addition, swept path analysis demonstrates that service vehicles can adequately access the site. Since only 3 parking spaces are proposed, one of these a disabled space, no significant traffic impacts on the local network should arise. There are objections that some occupants would need to park on Hanson Gardens. However, a Section 106 agreement would prevent occupants obtaining resident parking permits, and this, the site having good public transport accessibility, should limit potential parking pressures. The proposal incorporates various sustainability measures, and potential impacts with regard to air quality, noise, and land contamination can be adequately dealt with by conditions proposed. So overall, the scheme will provide some planning benefits, including an increase in the housing stock and regeneration of a site which is currently overgrown and occupied by derelict buildings. No factors have been identified sufficient to justify refusal. As such, it's recommended for approval, subject to Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. I hesitate to ask, is the film or the walkthrough ready to play in one go? That's a no, I think, at the moment. So I think we'll carry on if that's okay. We can come back to it if you fix it, but maybe we'll take some stills from it if the committee so wish to move it on to any particular point. Yeah, maybe go through it with the cursor. Just pull it across. See various images. I know it's not doing that either. Okay. Right, okay, so we have 2 speakers tonight. Right, okay. So we have Mr. Mitra who's objecting to this development, and you have 3 minutes, and we will tell you when it's 30 seconds to go, and we will stop you at 3 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Access. At the main meeting, the officer told us the width of the access is 3.3 meters, more than the minimum of 3.25 meters required. We are now told that access is between 3.1 and 3.26 meters. The officer's report at page 17 says both these figures exceed the minimum 3 to 3.1 meter width required for such vehicles as fire engines and the minimum carriageway width of 2.75 meters over short distances indicated by the government publication, the Manual for Street Volume 1. Whilst it remains unclear why the minimum width has been reduced from 3.25 to 3 or 3.1 meters, paragraph 6.73 of the Manual for Street Volume 1 states, a 3.7 meter carriageway curb to curb is required for operating space at the scene of a fire. Simply to reach a fire, the access route could be reduced to 2.75 meters over short distances, provided the pump appliance can get to within 45 meters of dwelling entrances. The distance of the furthest dwelling from the site entrance is some 80 meters, almost double that 45 meter requirement mentioned in the same document the officer refers to but fails to mention. What independent scrutiny has the planning department applied to the applicant's submissions? If something as fundamental as width of access is wrong, then everything that relies on that figure is also wrong. So the swept path analysis is based on 3.3 meters figures that doesn't exist and therefore is not worth the paper it is written on. In light of the tragic events at Grenfell, access to emergency vehicles is a fundamental safety requirement to any development, and we have now proved that access to the site is inadequate. Approval will endanger the lives of existing residents and new ones too. To make matters worse, the proposed refuse plan means bins will be left at the entrance for collection, making emergency access harder and causing public nuisance. Change of social use. The inspector's report deals with social infrastructure at paragraph 16, 17, and concludes at 25, harm would arise from the failure to demonstrate that social infrastructure cannot be developed on the site. At the last meeting, we discussed whether the inspector had been presented with the applicant's submission regarding abandonment. I've emailed the members the applicant's July 2020 planning application available on the council's website, which was subject to that appeal, and drawn your attention to the points dealing with abandonment, which are exactly the same as those raised in this application. The officer is therefore wrong when he says at page 11 it is unclear whether the information was available to the appeal inspector. It was. The applicant is now relying on a social needs assessment based on a nearby site on Beaconsfield Road. Why is a new assessment not being commissioned, especially when the officer tells us several times that the application should be assessed on its own merits without regard to further developments? Most importantly, unlike Beaconsfield assessment, no community consultation or marketing for social use of the site has been conducted. Beaconsfield site is very different to this one. A social use may be suitable for the applicant's site, but not for Beaconsfield Road and vice versa. Without a proper assessment, in the words of the inspector, harm would arise. Lack of required amenity space. 4 out of the 9 units do not meet the required amenity space according to policy 7D. On page 16.
Thank you. I realise you rushed it. If you've got a sentence or two to finish, I'll allow that. But that's so I was just going to say, in conclusion, petitioners are happy to see appropriate development in the locality, that it is the most basic town planning tenet, right development in the right place. This is not one of them. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have the applicant, Kate Matthews. Again, if you have 3 minutes, we'll give you a warning at 30 seconds out, and we will, the 3 minutes will be the end. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kate Matthews from First Plan. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant. The site under consideration is a derelict backland site within the Southall Opportunity Area. It was formerly in use by Southall College, but has been vacant for over 20 years. The buildings have fallen into disrepair, and the site now presents a great opportunity for regeneration. In respect to the existing use, we have demonstrated in our submission that the existing use has been abandoned, and this is supported by case law. As mentioned last time, we do not believe this was given due consideration by the inspector, as the appealed decision very specifically refers to the design and access statement, which did not contain this information. Notwithstanding this, since the last committee, we've provided a review of the community infrastructure requirements in the local area to show that there is no need for this site to be put into community use. The Beaconsfield Community Infrastructure Review was a very recent study carried out in 2020 and is less than 150 metres from the site. We reviewed all the information sources of this report to try and provide updates as appropriate. However, most of the information, which was from 2020 or slightly older, is still the latest information available in terms of school capacity, GP capacity, dentist capacity, etc. The site is ideally suited to residential development, and the optimisation of brownfield sites such as this is well supported at all policy levels. The design shares similarities with the hotel appeal scheme, and the inspector's report states that it will be attractively designed in a contemporary fashion with green roofs offering differing 2- and single-storey scales. He was therefore happy with it. With regard to parking, the scheme is supported by a transport assessment by TPP. This includes sweat path analysis. Following the last committee, the applicant has attended 2 site visits set on 2 occasions where the wall to number 6 appears to have mysteriously moved to narrow the passageway from 3.26 to 3.16, trespassing on the right of way. This is clearly evidenced by photographs we've provided to the planning officer. The narrowest width the transport officer is still happy with. We've also discussed with our transport consultant who felt that the sweat path analysis would still stand.
30 seconds.
There's no need for a fire engine to enter the site, as all properties will have sprinkler systems, and we'd be happy to provide a further condition to ensure this, albeit we would definitely carry it out. In relation to the private refuse collection, this arrangement has been permitted elsewhere in Ealing, such as at 10 to 12 the Mall. We believe it's a suitable arrangement and will ensure that the bins remain appropriately stored in their designated area.
Thank you. Unless you've got one sentence to sum up, I'll give you the same. As Mr.
Overall, we urge you to support this scheme, which will provide high quality, low rise houses which respect the amenity of their neighbours,
have a suitable access and will bring this derelict site back into use.
Thank you. I think that was equally spread. Councillor Chauhan, you have up to 5 minutes. And I always say this to councillors, up to 5 minutes. They don't have to use the 5 minutes if they do not need to. But thank you, and go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Firstly, I'd like to thank the panel for its thorough assessment of the case and the opportunity to discuss this again. At the last committee, major concerns were raised regarding the size of the only access to the backland site. Mr. Mitra has identified clear discrepancies between the minimum required length of the access and the two reports presented to the committee. It's important for transparency that officers make their rationale and frameworks consistent to avoid the sense that goalposts change to suit the requirements of developers. And the lack of clarity around minimum requirements still remains, therefore. Moreover, the waste removal plan remains highly unconvincing. After visiting the site on 2 occasions, I've seen that the possible obstructions this plan could pose. It becomes abundantly clear if you visit the site. The single exit and entry that is proposed to be apt for bins to be dragged to the public highway will lead to obstacles blocking the only access to the site, potentially blocking access for emergency vehicles also, and most definitely creating street clutter. Hanson Gardens is a cul-de-sac home to children and elderly folk, all of whom require ample paving space for socially distanced walking. We have numerous problems with our own in-house teams, or we have done in the past, and I have very little faith, to be honest, that a private contractor will perform to an even higher standard than the Green at Ealing is right now. We will see street clutter, which contravenes the council's SLR, as I previously mentioned. And during the last 3 years in office, I have received so much casework relating to fly tipping and SLR breaches. And I can already foresee this one being another one of those situations. The application also has insufficient mitigation measures against increased parking pressures in the area. The nearby Southall Waterside site was also a zero-car development, but again, I've received numerous casework from newly arrived residents complaining about the lack of parking available to them. The report notes ample parking during CPZ hours, but this is irrelevant to the case because new residents will not have permits to access those zones. Nevertheless, they will be able to use permitted spaces after CPZ hours, which is precisely when so many problems are occurring. And I've also recently been told that individuals living in the new Waterside site who have blue badges are still able to use permit zones. Together, this means an increase in parking pressures. And contrary to the council's argument, zero-car builds are not encouraging a modal shift in Southall. They're increasing tensions around parking between new and old residents or existing residents. I'd also like to follow up on the argument that new evidence was provided, leading to the conclusion that there is no legal requirement for the site to be used for social infrastructure. As clearly indicated by Mr. Mitra, no fresh evidence has been undertaken or provided by the developers. I'd say Southall is not really the same place it was 20 odd years ago when social use was abandoned of this site. And I believe it to be poor in light of this inspectorate's clear conclusions that the supposed new social use assessment that was undertaken wasn't actually appended into the pack. I think that would have been really helpful to have seen that evidence as well. And I say this because my own understanding as a resident of Southall and as a councillor is that we are experiencing significant pressures around social use facilities, doctors' surgeries, schools. I would really have liked to have seen that evidence. And I think that's particularly important because we're building more homes, but losing the possibility to grow our social infrastructure. And this is another case of that. Our local hospital has been gutted of services, our schools remain underfunded, our classroom sizes are large. I don't think those are things we can quibble with. Our police station, for all we know, still remains closed. And all these factors contribute to poorer quality of life for Southall residents, adding to high levels of structural inequality. And this report believes that there's no need for further social use on the site and the space should instead be converted to more homes. When will a full equalities impact be undertaken regarding the erosion of social infrastructure in Southall
30
and
seconds.
its replacement with homes that are far from genuinely affordable, as demonstrated in this case? And I think it's important to return to the issue of air quality that hasn't been mentioned. I know that this report and the developer has consulted, the social use report undertaken across the road, but therefore believe it's particularly prudent to consider the nearby Southall Waterside case. And I believe responsible developers should really be thinking and laying out clearly air quality monitoring plans, especially at sites so close to Southall Waterside. And I think the final thing I want to say is that these properties will not benefit residents in Southall. People here need social rents, not more market price properties.
I will have to stop you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cho. Yes, if it's ready to go, if the committee wish to see it, I think they did. Yes, if we can, thank you. Does the officer want to talk us through it? Would you like to orientate the committee where we are, officer? We're walking down an alley.
Well, we just come through the site access and panning around the site. It's a very difficult site to actually get into parts of it because of the derelict buildings and being overgrown. So there's a limit to what you can actually see, but there are a number of derelict buildings on it and, well, a lot of vegetation. That's probably as much as I can tell you about it.
Okay, thank you. It's a bit like watching someone's holiday video you don't want to watch, really. Someone got their mic on, sorry. Do you want to turn your mic on? Thank you, thank you. So, okay, so we've heard all the speakers tonight. Does the officer want to come back to any of the points that were raised, particularly by the objector or the applicant or Councillor Hogan?
Yes, I'd like to come back on quite a few of these points. First of all, the width of the site access. I believe the first time it was measured at 3.26 by my colleague, Mr. Barton, which I think to one decimal point is 3.3 meters, as we say in the report. I think it was another measurement taken a week later, when strangely it became slightly less wide for some reason, but not enough to make a significant difference. The width of the site is clearly adequate for vehicles. According to the government manual for streets, that width of access is quite adequate for short distances, and this is a short distance into the site. I think this objector is quite accurate that a fire engine has to get within 45 meters of the dwellings. If it can't, the developer has to provide sprinklers in the dwellings, and that's exactly what the applicant here has confirmed he's planning to do. So irrespective of the width of the access, there's not really an issue in terms of access by fire vehicles to the site. On the point about the social infrastructure assessment, I think the objector is suggesting that there should have been a bespoke assessment done for the site. There was, of course, one done for a site 100 meters away, less than 6 months ago. It covered the same area, it covered the same supply of community facilities, and is assessing the same needs. So it'd be quite surprising if the one that the applicant submitted now was much different from that. In fact, it should be almost identical, I would have thought. From our assessment of it, we think the applicant's done all that's reasonably could be expected in the way of assessing the needs for social infrastructure. And I think it's demonstrated quite convincingly that there isn't any. It was the same 6 months ago for the same area, and it's the same now. There was a point about the amenity spaces for the houses not being adequate. I just looked at these again. There's 9 houses, 6 of them exceed the 50 square meters, which is the target for houses. And 3 of them are only slightly below it, 42, 45, and 48 square meters, which with a reasonable amount of flexibility on a site like this, I think most people would consider quite adequate. The point about private refuse contractors, well, that's quite a common feature on a lot of applications we allow for. We've had this arrangement has been run past our waste and street services section, and they have no objection to it. So we can't see any reason why that shouldn't be acceptable. I think these are the main points that we have.
Okay, thank you, John. Just one question that comes to my mind, which was said, I think Councillor Chauhan talked about bins being pulled up the drive to the front. The way I read the report, the vehicle goes in, collects it, and turns around and comes back out again. Is that correct? They don't stack up by the roadside.
Well, that's my understanding of it. There's a turning head on the site in which the vehicle can collect the bins from.
I've had my question. Right, looking at members of the committee, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, just carrying on really from that question about the refuse collection, I think the thing that's concerning me, which I mentioned last time, is actually the sustainability of the private arrangement, because it just sounds like you've got one large, well, a small vehicle going particularly to go to some houses that wouldn't necessarily be in the area, just sent to collect rubbish from a certain number of houses once a week. And just how sustainable that would be. I mean, it's certainly something that you'd expect the people who live in the house would have to pay quite a hefty service charge in order to have that service provided. It does say that Greener Ealing, they seem to approve the plan, but I suppose for their job, it's really to approve the logistics of the plan as it's put down on paper. It's probably not really for them to look into the future and to look at the sustainability of it. And what really concerns me is that what happens, do we have a situation where these people who live in the houses are being charged a very hefty service charge in order to have this private vehicle sent out there especially? And then what happens if the service actually collapses at some stage? Then Greener Ealing, the council, have to step in and help, and they're not really in a particularly good position to do so because of the way the access has been put in place. And so really, that's really my concern as to the sustainability of it. And that's really the thing that's given me huge doubts over this application. Thank you.
I guess all I can really say is, I mean, we obviously can't predict what's going to happen in the future. I think all we can say is this is an arrangement that we've seen in quite a lot of development sites and we've approved in the past, usually with the condition, as we have here, for a refuse management plan to be approved by the council to try and understand what these arrangements will be to make sure they are adequate. I'm not sure what else we can reasonably do apart from that.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Councillor Rice?
As best as the officer can do so, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. The question, if I may, the fire engine can't get into the property, sprinkler systems are installed. Who then is responsible for maintaining the sprinkler systems in the long term?
I'm afraid I can't answer that question. I'd have thought the developer or some arrangement made by the developer, but I don't know how that works. It's not really a planning issue that we get into in detail, I'm afraid.
Carry on.
Sorry, that may well change. Obviously, there is new legislation about to be issued, and we'll be getting to obviously get some understanding of that. But as I understand it, in the future there will be more compliance measures placed on buildings, and it probably will come under that kind of control. But I don't have the details of that because it's not yet released.
Thank you.
Okay. Did that go towards answering your question?
Yes, it did. Yes, thanks.
Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. The two things in terms of this proposed development is surrounded by, just wanted to clarification from you, surrounded by CPZ or not?
Question.
Now, for the future residents, what's the future kind of transport connectivity in terms of Petal rate?
Well, the existing PTAL rate for the site is 3, which is sort of moderate, and it is in our CPZ. And obviously we'd be applying a Section 106 agreement to restrict resident permits. So does that answer the question, or was there some other point there?
I think you did. The PTL rating is 3, Councillor Mahmood. It is in the CPZ area, and the 106 restricts any future occupiers from having a permit within that CPZ area. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that okay? Does that answer your question? Councillor Brett.
Yeah, just to go back on the accessibility for emergency vehicles, in particular the fire brigade. I know that the lady who spoke on behalf of the applicant, and you've kind of said yourself that we're going to now have sprinkler system. I mean, emergency access and the fire brigade don't just attend properties for fires. So there are other issues as to why they might attend a fire. And my concern was it was slightly dismissive, which was, oh, well, we've got sprinkler systems, so they won't need to access the site anyway, because that fundamentally that just rings alarm bells for me. So I just wanted to kind of get a little bit more clarity on what that means, because you know, it's not just fires as to why the fire brigade might go, or ambulances or whatever. So thank you.
Sure. I think the point I was making was the access is actually wide enough for a fire engine. We've been told a fire engine measures 3.1 meters mirror to mirror, and it would be able to get through there, okay? I'm just making the point about the sprinklers because the objector raised it with the 45 meters. So it kind of a fail-safe mechanism. As far as we can tell from the access, the site is accessible for a fire engine. And in any event, it could be dealt with by sprinklers as well. I mean, so it seems there's two things there.
Are you content with the answer?
No, because like you haven't actually addressed the issue with that they don't need just access for a fire. So the sprinkler system will help if there is a fire in one of the properties. But if they've got any issues with the access, and you've just said yourself, as far as you know, that they will be able to access the site. What if development happens and then you realise that actually they can't access it properly? It feels a little bit dismissive, and I think it's quite concerning.
Sorry, I just wanted to come in on that. I think the point here about the access is that it does measure to be a suitable width for a range of vehicles, including a fire engine. And I understand the point. I don't think the officer was intending on being dismissive around the issues around the, what it could be used for and why people would need to access a site. Point is, it is suitable. And the issues around fire are very serious, particularly in any backland development setting. And we have a long history at London Borough of dealing with backland sites. So these issues are not unusual. They will obviously be questioned in the members' deliberations. So I think it is important, obviously, that we also bear in mind that in terms of accessibility, that has been assessed and is considered to be suitable. There are, of course, other measures that also fall outside of planning, which would also be required to be satisfied in terms of meeting standards, and things like sprinkler systems or dry risers and those sorts of things are routinely used in those sorts of sites for a range of different uses as well. So I think it is important. I think the point around, I know it wasn't your particular point, but I do want to kind of clear this up, but in terms of refuse collection as well. From my understanding of the report is that we want to obviously ensure that there's a proper strategy in place for refuse collection. And again, that is something that we routinely see on proposed developments. Our own council's refuse department, I'm not saying they wouldn't collect from that site. We have had in some circumstances, some difficult sites where the developers through their own refuse management plan have opted to use private services. And of course, there are implications on the occupiers. Obviously, our preference is to use our own refuse collection, and obviously that makes it much more simpler in the long run for the occupiers of the development. I don't think there's any evidence at this stage that wouldn't be the case. What we have got is, the ability for vehicles to go into the site, and where the refuse is deposited on collection day. That will form part of the refuse management plan. So those issues are quite typical in this type of application, and we have seen this before at Planning Committee. Just wanted to give us some reassurance on that.
Just to add to that, we do have, our own rubbish collection service has smaller vehicles. I don't know if you mentioned that, Alex, but we do have smaller vehicles for small, tight roads. One in Hobbane Ward, which is by the station. It's Campbell Road, and they have a smaller vehicle that goes in. So it can be done if it did fall into our control or that way. But at the moment, we cannot look at the future. We just have to deal with what's in front of us today, I think, in terms of refuse, that is. Councillor Ball.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've seen on the video how narrow the access is, and I do share Councillor Brett's concerns about emergency access. Notwithstanding your point about smaller vehicles, if you struggle to get a full-size fire engine down there, then that is problematic. And if it's 3.1 metres mirror to mirror, and as I understand it, the gap at the smallest point is 3.1 metres, you need a few centimetres clearance, so that seems to be difficult. I also agree with Councillor Rice that the private waste arrangements sound difficult. Also, we heard that there were 3 units below the minimum amenity space, which again, it all kind of builds up a picture of too much trying to be squeezed onto a small site. So, yeah, I'd be minded to refuse, but what I'd want to say at this point is that if we did grant it, there is the applicant accepted a condition requiring sprinklers, so that's something that we can add in. I don't think that was in the conditions at the moment, is it? So could we add a condition requiring the installation of sprinklers before first occupation?
Sorry, I'll propose that at the point of the vote, Councillor Ball. So, I don't see any other indications. Oh, Councillor Padder.
Thank you, Chair. So it's only a point of clarification on amenity space. The officers are saying that it doesn't meet our own policy, but we're still working this as a recommendation. So our policy says the garden space has got to be 50 square meters, but these are less than that. Can you clarify that?
It's about the space again.
Amenity space. That's
amenity space.
We are not meeting our own policies. 7D, where we say that our amenity space or the garden is got to be 50 square meters, and these are less than, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, there's 9 houses on the site. 6 of them have amenity space exceeding 50 square meters. 3 of them are marginally below it by, I mean, it's a matter of a few square meters. With most permissions we grant, we don't always insist on meeting 50 square meters exactly. There's got to be some flexibility because some sites have different issues. I mean, I think that's quite a reasonable proportion exceeding it. And the amount the sum or below it is so small, I don't think it makes a huge difference. These seem quite adequately sized gardens by most standards. So I think we think on balance it's adequate.
Okay, I don't see any more people indicating to speak, so I think we're minded to go to the vote, and with that, we should go for the condition on sprinklers that the applicant has offered up this evening. So do we have to separate vote for the?
Yeah, we best to vote for approval.
All right, okay, we'll do that. Okay.
If it's approval with all that.
We can do that afterwards. Okay, right. So, okay, I'm minded to go to the vote this evening. So
I just want to make a recommendation rather than specific about sprinklers. Perhaps the condition that you would want to attach would ask for a fire strategy for the site. And in which case, you know, whatever came out of that is the most compliant, would be the most compliant thing. And it will obviously be similar to information that has to be submitted to building regulations as well. So rather than being focusing on one solution, it should just seek the fire strategy for the site.
sorry, I said and implement the conclusions of that strategy within the site. So, okay, with that in mind, and we will, if the application is approved, we will go to that condition. If not, we don't need that condition. So, all those in favour, please show. All those against? 2. Abstentions? Sorry. Okay, so the application is carried. So we do need to do the condition, the fire strategy. So it's the condition, for want of a better terminology, is for the applicant to have a fire strategy, an approved fire strategy in consultation with the local authority, and to implement the findings of that fire strategy. All those in favour of that condition, please show. All those against? I think that's unanimous. Sorry, there wasn't any abstentions on that, was there? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, we move on to 1A and 3, the Mount Ealing. Greg, I'm just sticking to the order tonight, if that's okay. Okay, 1A, 3, the Mount Ealing Broadway. The officer is Olivia Nelson. And would you like to present the scheme? Have you got slides? Good. Go ahead, Olivia. Would you like to present the scheme?
Sorry, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Is it okay to start the video? The application site is a backland site.
and it is within the Ealing Broadway ward. It is also within the Ealing Town Conservation Area. The application site has a PTAR rating of 6B. Previously on the site, there has been planning permissions for a 38 co-living room scheme, which was a part 5, part 6-story building, and a 71 co-living room scheme, which was an 8-story building. The current proposal seeks to construct a 10-story building to provide 81 co-living rooms with affordable housing provision on site. It should be noted that the previous granting of applications on the site were assessed against the draft London plan, policy H18, later to become policy H16, which is for large-scale purpose-built shared living. The policy in which this type of housing sits, so this is the site as you walk in from the Mall. It was formerly a taxi rank. To the left of the site is National Westminster Bank, and there's a car park that you can see. And as we go up, you can see the site with spoil on the site. Neighbouring vehicle accesses are to the right. As mentioned, to the left is the National Westminster Bank car park, and that is a Grade 2 listed building. As we pan further up, you can see a top-down view of the application site. And adjacent to the site are TPO trees, and you can also see in view Ealing Broadway Station and platforms, which is on the Crossrail line. These are different views of the site. So obviously this is a more up-to-date one, would show the station finished, and that would be the view from there. This is a view looking at Metro Bank and the National Westminster Bank, and it would be visible to see the building in between those two buildings. And this is views from across the road.
Sorry, am I missing something? I didn't see a view. I didn't see anything. Is it just me? Oh. I can see that what's existing, but I can't see what show. Can you point to where it is?
Sorry, this is for the site visit.
Oh, right, okay, sorry. Right, okay. I thought I was missing something.
Yeah, I'll show that later on.
A red line or something there. Right, okay.
The policy in which this type of housing sits is in its infancy, and the proposed policy now has considerable weight. The previous applications at this site are also considered to be material considerations. It should be noted that the first scheme, which was a 38 co-living room scheme, did not fall under the large-scale purpose-built living, as it was less than 50 rooms. In terms of need, based on the West London Strategic Housing Market Assessment, this mentioned that there is a need for more shared housing with small purpose rooms with shared amenity spaces. It can be considered that the proposed co-living accommodation would meet an emerging need as supported within the SHMA and the London Plan. The proposal would seek to provide much needed shared accommodation, which would be beneficial to those younger persons and ages above seeking smaller accommodation for their needs. The proposal would be located within an area that benefits from excellent accessibility with a PTR rating of 6B and has good links to public transport nodes and access to community facilities such as parks. The proposal would be compatible with the neighbouring land uses, as there is a mix of commercial and residential within the vicinity. And it's not considered that it would in any way have adverse impacts on the surrounding area. Is it okay to start the PowerPoint presentation, please? The The application is a departure from London Plan Policy H16. The London Plan Policy mentions, with respect of affordable housing, that there should be an off-site contribution. In the assessment of this application, it was supported by a financial viability assessment and an affordable housing assessment. And with respect of that, I'll detail what was proposed. The policy target payment, when assuming 100% market rent for an 81-room scheme, would be a payment of £3 million. This is a payment considered at the outset prior to any site consents or material considerations, or taking into account existing consents. In particular, an assessment of viability compares the proposed scheme with the implemented consent. The viable payment, when assuming 100% market rent of the 81-room scheme, would provide a maximum of £500,000 for off-site provision. It should be noted that the proposed development increases the size of the units and creating a betterment to what was previously granted. And as such, rather than the 25 affordable units previously sought as affordable rent at London Living Rent discount market rent, the application would be proposing 28 units. And those 28 rooms would be rented at London Living Rent for the Ealing Broadway ward, with 16 of the rooms at 80% of the market rent, 12 of the rooms at 70% of the market rent. The rooms would be let at the London Living Rent levels, which for 2021-2022 are £235.43 per week. These rents are inclusive of service charges, and also included in the rental price would be the use of all amenities at the site, including dinner party, kitchens, workspace, breakout rooms, coffee areas, cocktail lounges, laundry facilities, security, cleaning, and access to the roof terrace. Co-living is an intermediate product for those looking to live and work in the city whilst having an affordable place to stay. With regard to providing social rent on site, due to the nature of the co-living type being for a minimum of 3 months with a maximum up to 3 years, it does not necessarily meet the housing need for all. It would, however, provide a viable product for use. Co-living is a form of build-to-rent, and as such, discount market rent is the most appropriate form of housing. Were we able to get the PowerPoint presentation? Oh, okay. So the current proposal seeks an increase in height, with the top story set back from the front. The proposed height is 29 meters high, and as such, it's not GLA referable. The design is a high-quality contemporary design, which provides interest to the rear of the site. It does not seek to mimic its neighboring properties, nor does it appear to be a contrived palette of materials. The fenestration is evenly matched throughout the building. The proposal would meet the majority of the policy points in Policy H16 of the London Plan. It is good quality design. It contributes towards mixed and inclusive neighborhoods.
Its units are all rent with minimum tenancy lengths of no less than 3 months. Communal facilities and services are provided with convenient access to a communal kitchen, outside communal amenity space, internal communal amenity space such as dining areas and lounges, laundry and drying facilities, a 24/7 concierge dealing with deliveries and post, bedding and linen changing, and room cleaning services. The proposal would provide private rooms with additional functional living space and layout. None of these rooms would be self-contained. The scheme is an overall improvement with layout, more thought out due to the global pandemic. And this has also contributed to larger private spaces for occupiers. The room sizes range from 15.1 square meters to 23.6 square meters, with 8 of these rooms being wheelchair compliant and DDA compliant. There are communal kitchens provided at first and fourth floor levels, and this allows for a more joined up cooking and socializing aspect. The communal space at ground floor level allows for people to effectively live, work, and play at home. The proposed terrace at roof level allows for longer views of the borough and beyond. The proposal would provide financial contributions to the borough in terms of health. It is a development which exceeds the 35% carbon reduction target for non-residential development, and there is no carbon offset payment due. The scheme is a car-free development and has a provision of cycle parking. The highly sustainable location allows occupiers to move around both the borough and the city as a whole with ease. The scheme seeks to provide a commitment to giving greater housing choice and also enabling occupiers to create a sense of community. Here you can see a kitchen at the bottom left, the shower room at the top, and then an indicative view of how the terracing would look at roof level. Officers have minded to grant this application subject to conditions and a Section 106 legal agreement.
Thank you. Is there more? Okay. Okay, right. Thank you very much for that. Very comprehensive report. Presentation. I didn't see, Councillor Conti was the first one I saw.
Thank you. I was just a little bit sort of confused by the sizings. I feel like there's some contradictions in the report. Obviously, it says that you're adding 2 additional floors, but the height of the building is going to be the same as was initially proposed. But then you mentioned that there's an increase in the size of the unit. I just feel like, how can all those things match together? Because if you're reduced, because clearly, obviously, you're talking about the footage, but what's about the height of the rooms? If 2 additional stories are being added, but the actual overall height of the building is the same, what is the sort of I don't know the exact term for it, but the height of each of the flat units going to be? Because it sounds like those 2 things can't both be right. The units are getting bigger, but you're cramming more floors into the same height.
Shall we take these in threes, if that's all right? Let's do it in one at a time in case there's something to come back on.
Are you able to put the presentation up, please?
I will. Give a second or two. Councillor Rice, would you like to ask your question while we're waiting for technology to catch us up?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's actually interesting, the development that we get the chance to talk about this, because I was on the scrutiny panel, which was covering children's services, and there was a discussion on children who are leaving care, obviously reaching young adulthood, and that the borough was having problems actually housing them satisfactorily. And I did actually suggest that maybe it'd be an idea at some stage is that when we are doing co-living developments and providing permission, that maybe we could ensure that some of those young people leaving care had some kind of priority, because it's be a good way of making sure they get properly looked after, and we could kill a few birds with one stone, as it were. But following on from that, I know we can't really solve that problem necessarily tonight, but following on from that, the one thing that does actually confuse me with this is modular build, and I'm trying to work out how that's going to actually work in reality, because you've got very much a main road at the front where surely maybe trucks or whatever, going to have to come along with the ready-built sections of the building, and then they're going to have to get through somehow a tight, narrow space, as we've just been discussing in quite a lot of detail, tight, narrow spaces, and somehow get through to the other side. That's how in theory, it looks to me like it worked, but how would it really work in reality? Would you be able to get a crane into that space where it's quite a large area of main road? Would you be able to get a crane there without causing too much of disruption to actually maybe carry over parts of the building? I can't really get my head around how this is going to work, but it would just be lovely. If anyone's got any guidance on that, please, thank you.
Are we ready to answer those two questions?
Yes. Okay, with respect to the first question, so yes, the width of the site remains the same, but due to how the floor print would work, it's been reworked to allow for the additional 6 meters in height to create those 10 rooms. There'll be 10 rooms, and there will be additional internal amenity space at the upper 4 levels. So as you go up the floors 1 and 4 would be the same, and they have kitchen facilities to the left-hand side of the building, and the linear footprint of the rooms, some would be smaller, they're not all uniform sizes. So then it allows for the creation of the 10 additional rooms, but also creating larger spaces than was previously granted in the 71 unit scheme.
Does that answer your question?
So yeah, just to say, the height is increasing. I don't know if the report says it's not, but the height is increasing.
Use your microphone. Okay.
There was a paragraph, I'm just trying to re-find it now. There was a paragraph in the report that said the height wasn't increasing, which that didn't make sense to me, but that's fine. You've explained that. Thanks.
Councillor Rice's question.
Yep. So yeah, I think that's a very good suggestion that you've mentioned, Councillor Rice, with regard to people leaving care, and then hopefully that is something which in later applications can be discussed. With respect of the building, how it's been designed is that a lot of the parts would be constructed away from the site. And yes, they would be transported to the site, but due to how the product is, it would be quite easy to assemble as you go up. There is no need for larger cranes, as mentioned, and the site can be accessed from the front, which was visible on the video, but there is also vehicle access to the side as well on the other properties on the mall. So yeah, all of that's been looked at. With the previous schemes, there was a construction logistics plan, which for the 71 unit scheme has already been granted. So this scheme seeks to follow on from that.
Okay, Councillor Rice. So I've got Councillor Ball next.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I suppose first thing to say is that I've got mixed feelings about this sort of scheme in general, when we've had a few of them, because I mean, in one sense, they're a way of having residential accommodation which doesn't meet standards in terms of you know, unit sizes and so on. However, I can see that there is a market for this sort of thing. So, I mean, I guess the point here is that there has been a consented scheme already for similar. So we've kind of already decided that that use is acceptable on that site. But then I think the real issue here is that it's a very, very sensitive site. I mean, it's very close to the junction that's kind of right at the heart of Ealing, and it's immediately next to the NatWest Bank, which was, of course, the original Ealing Town Hall, and is grade 2 listed. So, I mean, can we have a picture up of the CGI of the building visible from the front, from that that junction, sort of, from the north star sort of thing.
Yes, so this is the CGI that you mentioned. So here you can see the Metro Bank, and then you can see the Grade 2 listed NatWest Bank. The arrow that you can see on the left-hand picture denotes the proposed building.
There's a tree there. If you were
I mean, the tree is actually there.
Well, sure, but
and it's obviously not in bloom. So when it is in bloom, then obviously it will be less visible in that sense.
I think the point is, though, if somebody was standing a few feet to either side, there wouldn't be a tree immediately in front of it. This is the problem.
And then
you asked for a picture, you got a picture.
Well, yeah.
And then the one on the right shows in front of Ealing Broadway Station. You can see the top of the building, obviously when you stand there. So, and also next to it, you can see Villiers House, and then you can see, the side of that building.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I don't think there's a problem from Haven Green from in front of the station, but I do think there's a concern from the Mall that you are having quite a tall building. I mean, so there's a 6 meter difference from the consented scheme. I mean, I guess that is ultimately my concern, is that it's a bit more intrusive than the original consented scheme. As I say, the other changes to it are I think overall beneficial, because they improve the living conditions, and you've also got slightly more affordable. So the other changes to the scheme are helpful, but I think increasing the height by 6 meters at such a sensitive point is my difficulty. I mean, I'm trying to formulate it into a question or a statement. I mean, I suppose the question.
Please. Yeah.
Sorry.
It has been a bit of a ramble so far.
Yeah. Sorry. I guess the question is, what was your process of, thinking through the effect on the conservation area? Bearing in mind it's right at the heart of the Ealing Town Centre conservation area. The additional is the additional height not going to
I think
mean
we've got the question.
You've got the question, yeah, fine. Okay.
Is it okay just to go a few along on the presentation to the elevations? Yes. Yes, so the scheme was assessed against the National Planning Policy Framework, as well as the Ealing Town Centre Conservation Planning Appraisal. So with this, as you can see, the red line denotes the consented scheme and the views of it. The highest part is set back from the front by 3.2 meters. And in doing so, it's set back from the NatWest Bank, the Grade 2 listed building, to help reduce the impact of this proposal. The assessment was such that it would not have a harm on this heritage asset. Overall, it was considered that the scheme, the increase by 6 meters factored in by the setback from that building, is not considered to be demonstrably to show any harm to the building than the previous scheme. I think the key element here is the setback of the top floor.
Councillor Ball, I think if you're okay with that answer to the question, I think he has answered it very well. Councillor Summers.
Yeah, thank you. It's a similar sort of question to Councillor Conti, or on the height issue. And as you just mentioned, looking back, 2019, they had a 5-story application approved. Then they came back the following year for 7 stories. Now they've come back for 10 stories, 6 meters taller. And you said now there's no demonstrable harm. Is there anything to stop them coming back next year with a 13-story, 15-story, or would you then consider that's demonstrable harm? I know we can only judge what's before us, but do you in your planning terms, is this, you know, as tall as they can get without you likely refusing it?
I think, yeah, as you're aware, Councillor, I can't answer that question because I can only assess what's in front of me. But the assessment made is that what is proposed is considered to be acceptable in this location, which is highly sustainable, providing a housing product which, of course, is in its infancy, but is quite important to the needs of Londoners and especially to the needs of people in Ealing.
I think this, sorry, following on from Councillor Summers, I think that this committee do get fed up with people coming back again and again and increasing sizes, but we can only look at what we're looking at tonight. But I think this committee can give a steer that this is it really for this site. I mean, that's all we can say really, that we wouldn't be minded to go any higher if it was to come back. That's all we can give a steer. We can't give a you know, a hard and fast rule, because that someone can come back and they're quite entitled to come back with you know, however many stories they want to. But that's what we can say out loud, and people can hear us or not hear us, and that's done to them. So, Councillor Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, I do have grave reservations about this building and about its long-term future, because you've gone on at length about the amenities within the building, but for me that is a building that shuts people off from the community and therefore is not productive. My actual question is strangely about the noise. I have actually been round into that area. It's an acoustic chamber and a very, very noisy railway line. It's on the express side of the railway lines. Has any thought been put into mitigation of that noise? Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so as per the previous proposals, the constrained nature of the site adjacent to the railway lines has been a concern throughout. It has been deemed that the windows would be non-opening at the rear, with mechanical air ventilation going into the co-living rooms. The noise obviously from the Uxbridge Road and the Mall has also been sought and looked into, and with respect of that, due to the distance of the building from the main road, it is considered that it would be an acceptable position for the building. What should be noted is that it is different to conventional housing, whereby the windows that are needed are different than this product. So those thoughts have been looked at in terms of noise. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. It's more or less its question has been asked by Councillor Ball, but I just wanted to know more about that in terms of effect on heritage, especially the conservation area, the green conservation area, and the Grade 2 listed buildings. So and there are 7 representation from Ealing Ealing Green Conservation Area. So what can be done more in terms of mitigate that effect?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so the proposal is obviously looked at in terms of longer views. I guess similar to the Ealing Town Hall scheme, it's about the longer views within the conservation areas, which are key. The views of the proposal, yes, it will be visible from locations, I guess in particular from the railway lines, but also when you're on the platform, you can see Villiers House, you can see, you may not even be able to see the Metro Bank, but you do see that within the borough there are buildings of a certain height, but what is proposed in terms of its context isn't considered to be a tall building. And when going back to the railway lines, when you're viewing from the platforms, you're at a level which is a lot lower than ground floor level. So naturally, any building is going to appear taller. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration. It's not considered that the building would detrimentally impact the skyline in the locality. You can see in this image here, obviously the arrow and the tree, obviously a different day or further back, you would begin to see parts of the building, but it wouldn't be overly large in this position. So it has been assessed in terms of its impact, and obviously we have seen the increase in size as mentioned, but yeah, what has been assessed is that it's an acceptable impact within the conservation area and the nearby listed building.
Councillor, sorry, was you okay with that answer, Councillor Mahmood? You need to put your mic on if you're speaking.
So that it cannot be done it cannot be mitigated in terms of that effect, which is happening on heritage.
I think the officers said that, so.